Hi, it's Craig Dewey here. Welcome to another Craig's Hacks for Tableau. This one's a special edition. My colleague Sharad and I are about to go and present at the Tableau User Group Sydney, February 2018. And we're just doing a practice run now. We thought we'd record it and smash it up onto YouTube. So away we go. So the first tip I've got for you is this Excel file. So I'm going to drag that onto my canvas here. And that was a tip as per Jeff Shaffer in TCC 17's 50 tips in 50 minutes. So I'm going to show you that has now created a data source. One drag created a data source. So I go down to my sheet and I can see there it is there. So if I wanted to have a look at what's inside that data source, I can actually click on that little icon there. It shows me the first 10,000 rows. So that's one way of seeing a data source. Another good way is just a simple double click on things. So if I want to see my codes, I want to see my descriptions, Tableau pops them there onto the rows for me and I can have a bit of a look at what's going on there. And I can quickly see that this looks like airport codes to me. So wouldn't it be cool to have airport codes on a map? Well, the good news is Tableau now allows you to have a geographic role called airport. So once I change that, I get my little world symbol, and when I double click on it, hey presto, I've now got airports on a map. Let's grab description down here and we'll have a look. So there's a whole bunch of airports out in the Pacific. There's called Brisbane and Sydney. So another tip for you, it's a bit hard to see that map. I'm going to go into map layers now, and it's often easier to see that when it's dark. Is that a bit easier to see? Cool, all right. Well, let's see what else we can do with that map. So I see on a measure here we've got a UTC variance. Let's see what that looks like on colour. Now Tableau always puts measures on a continuous scale there, and that's not really much use to us. But did you know you can actually just easily change that to be discrete, even though it's a measure, and now I get each integer is now a highlightable thing. So I can see all of the airports that are in the same time zone as Sydney. Cool. So the next tip I've got for you is how to find things. So normally if you do a filter, it zooms in and shows you just that one thing. But how about I just want to highlight something? So this is an underused feature of Tableau. I don't see it used much, but I'm going to say show highlighter. And now if I start typing in, say, Narita Airport, there it is, it's highlighted there for me. There she is there. It's in Japan. So how about I zoom in on Japan, and normally you'd use your zoom tool to zoom in on Japan, but there's a quicker way to do it. See this little search button up here? If I type in Japan, hey presto, I'm now zoomed in on Japan. I can see there's a bunch of different airports in Japan. There's our Narita, and there's another one here, Haneda, right next to it. They're both in Tokyo. So let's go and have a bit of a closer look at those, and we'll see what we can find out. So there's Tokyo, there's our two airports. Looks like one's closer than the other. I wonder how close they are to Tokyo. Let's go into our map menu. This is another Jeff tip. In map options, show map scale. Watch what happens down the bottom right hand side of my screen. Hey, there's a 50k marker. I can roughly see that this airport's about 50 k's from Tokyo. So the next tip is actually to tell you exactly how close it is to Tokyo. But before we do that, where exactly is the centre of Tokyo there? It's a bit hard to tell. So I'm going to go back into my map layers, and I'm going to turn on streets and highways. So all roads lead to Tokyo. There we go. It's pretty obvious now where the centre of Tokyo is. Now, to measure the distance, I'm going to use my radial selection tool. So I'm going to click on the centre of Tokyo here. And I'm going to do it again. Something goes wrong there. And I'm going to click on Tokyo and drag it out. It's about 15 k's to that airport and about 60 k's to that airport. No wonder it cost me $200 to get a cab to get out there. I'll have to tell you that story over a beer later. But before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Sharad. He's going to take you through some more tips.
All right, so this is Sharad, and thanks, Craig, for having me on your YouTube channel. Those were some nice tips, and let's see what I can produce. So my first tip is clear your sheet. So this is I've got some stuff already on, but if you want to clear your sheet in one go, you just press that on the top, and there you go, your sheet is cleared except your title, which is very handy because you want to remember what you were doing before. So most of my tips are from custom date format. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click drag my order date. It's really important to do right click because that will give you this option. So you can now actually choose what kind of operation you want to do on your order date. So I'm going to select my year on order date. I'm going to go on my filter which I'm going to use later on. So then I'm going to select my sales measure and put it on the row shelf, and it will give me a nice little line chart. I'm going to change it to a bar chart and drill down into my quarter. And now you can see how the year and quarters are on the opposite side of the axis. So I found this little trick. If you go into your table layout and go into advanced section, you can untick this innermost level at bottom thing, and your innermost level and your years now are on the same side of the axis. Very handy for people who are migrating from Excel to Tableau. For my next step, and before doing that, I'm actually going to show you one more tip. So again, in the same options, you can change the number of columns that you have in your table if you have one on your worksheet. So before this, you have to go in XML and make this dirty change, but now in Tableau you have this feature right here. So I'm going to click that innermost level at bottom again, and I'm going to change my quarter to month, a continuous month that is, and I'm going to show you how the custom date format works. So if you go into your dates and go into custom right at the bottom, you can actually type double M to get your numeral for your month. A triple M will give you an abbreviated month, 4 M's will give you a whole month, and 5 M's will give you the first character of your month. And you notice how they're not exactly aligned with the bar chart. That's because your month start, it's based out of your month start date. So what you can do is you can double click a pill, and it opens up in an edit mode, and you can just straight away type plus X number of days, and it will actually add those dates in your data, and see how after adding 15 days, how the J is perfectly aligned to the bar chart. So that's another little handy tip there. For my next step, I'm going to change my month to a week format, and I'm going to remove few of the years there, and see, even after changing to week, the data is still on the date format. So what I want to do over here is have a week number, and typically how you would go about it is you will go to your you'll write a calc that would be date part week, and then concatenate that with a W. But actually there's a very easy way to go about it, and that is again using your custom date format and typing an escape for a character W, and then a couple of more small W's to give you your week number. And that saves a lot of calc actually. So yeah, it's a very handy calc. All right, so my last custom number format this time is about how you can have a plus sign in your positive axis. So if you just go into your format for your axis, and in the numbers, again go to the custom size, you see how Tableau comes up with all these hints. So let me break it down for you. So how it works is you have a semicolon, and then anything on the right side, left side of the semicolon is your positive axis, and anything on the right is your negative axis. So if you type this in that, and then click apply, it straight away gives you a positive, and it's really useful when you're doing a trend or an NPS score. So that's another tiny little tip for you guys. All right, for my next step, I'm going to show you how to zoom in axes on a dashboard. So traditionally, we've always been able to do it when we do it in a dev environment. So you just go into your edit axis and you unclick include 0, and see, when you unclick include 0, it zooms into an axis. But what if you want to give this functionality to your end user? So the trick for that is you create a zoom parameter. So I have a zoom parameter with yes and no value, and then I have a calc based out of that parameter. And in that calc, I've written very simple calc there. So if the zoom parameter is no, then do 0. Let me show you how that works. So once I drop this calc on my level of detail shelf, and I go into analytics mode and get my reference line on the measure, I can change it to zoom in axis and mark none as my label, and maybe I'll have a line color there. So you see how there's a 0 value reference line has formed right in the end. So this will help us get our task done. So if I go into edit axis and I exclude my 0. So it is still driven off the parameter now because of that no, the 0 area is still occupied by the reference line, and that's why you see a zoomed out image. But now if you click on yes, so there is null for the reference line, that goes away, and now you can zoom in into your axis. So a very little tip, very handy tip actually for your end user if they wanna zoom into a particular axis. So I can go on, but I need to hand it over to Craig because my 5 minutes are over. Thanks.
Good one, Sharad. Thanks, Sharad. All right, so back to my workbook here. So I'm going to go and create a new data source. I'm just going to go to my saved data sources here, and there it is, APAC Superstore. So APAC Superstore has got sales data in it over time. So the best way to measure over time is it's got to be a line chart. So I'm going to use Sharad's tip here, right mouse click and drag a date, and I'm going to go with quarters here. And I'm going to double click on sales, and Tableau pops that in as a row and makes it into a line chart. So they agree. So line charts, quite often I like to have a little dot at every mark, and the quick way to do that is go into your color, and then there's a little tip here for markers. So you put a little dot on there. Sometimes that's a bit too much, and you don't really want a dot on every mark. Maybe you only want dots on the ends of your line. So this is a tip I learned recently by watching Andy Kriebel. And if we turn on the show mark labels and we do line ends, so we don't get a dot there. But if we do have a min max, and this is something that one of Andy's data school people pointed out to him, that if you choose the field here of quarter order date instead of sales, you actually get a reference there of your line ends. But here's the trick. Now we just grab our sales, we drag that onto label, and we've got a little dot with a label at the end of both of our lines there. So let's zoom into month, and then maybe show you how to zoom in to week, and we can even zoom in to day. But here's another tip for you. If you wanted to zoom back out again, instead of having to drop down and choose your particular time, what you might not have known is that you can actually do a little minus here. You can go back to minus, go say back out to month. And what's happened to our line? We've gone with our min max has gone back, so we're just going to have to reset that one back to month. So that's a tip, reset that one and keep it at the same time grain if you want those two dots to hold. But maybe there's a better way to do two dots. Let's see. So I'm going to control drag that over there, and I'm a fan of having big dots. So I'll show you how to make some big dots. So control drag makes a copy. I've got 2 copies now. Double click in there. I can now click in there and I can create a formula on the fly. So if I say if first equals 0 or last equals 0, then sum of sales, and I could say end, control enter. Oh, I've spelled first wrong. First. Alright, so we control end now. Now we get our 2 little dots. They're still little. What do we do? So let's click in here, and now I'm going to change that automatic mark to be a circle mark. A bit bigger. Let's make it even bigger again. And we might even change them to be, say, orange. Alright, so now we've got 2 big circles at either end of our line. Let's get rid of the label off the first line here. And how do we make that a dual axis really quickly? Answer is drag that one over here. See that dotted line there? Now that's a dual axis. We synchronize them, of course. Maybe we hide the header, and we get rid of our measure names there. And we're back to a nice line with a dot at either end. So that's pretty cool. So what about the label here? I'm not a real fan of showing labels right down to the dollar unless you need to. So how about I just quickly flick that back to something different. So what I normally have to do is just format that guy, but that's not a real measure. How about I make that a real measure first, and then I can format it once and for all. So if I control drag that over into my measures pane, you can see that's now created a measure. I'm just going to call that one first or last sales. And now I can format that one to have a default format. But why don't I control click on a couple of other measures that I know I'd also like them to have a default numeric format of, say, currency with noticeable places and a K. So that's pretty cool. So why don't I duplicate this sheet? And next one I'm going to show you is a dotted line in Tableau. Is that possible? I heard a lot of people say it's not, but in fact, when you search the blogs out there, there's quite a lot of blog activity going back right to 2012 about how to create a dotted line. So it goes to show you that you can teach an old blog new tips. So Sharad's cringing. So all right, so I'm going to use this one. I'm going to get rid of my line. I'm just going to keep my dots even. I'm going to control drag my month onto the pages shelf. That's right, the pages shelf. I'm going to fast forward my little movie here to the end. So I've got a dot at the end, and here's the tip. So we click on Show History. We click All, we click Trails, and here we go, a dotted line. And we might even go a grey one. So there you go, a dotted line in Tableau. Who would have thought you'd see that one? So, all right, for my last piece before I hand over to Sharad again, I'm just going to show you a bit more on reference lines. So reference lines are really good for creating white space on a chart. So I'm going to grab my month, and I'm going to filter down to a subset of the data. So instead of actually filtering this, I'm just going to show filter. Here it is over there. I can drag that one up to here, say, and there you go. So I've got a bit of white space underneath there, and just like Sharad was showing before, sometimes it's best to turn the 0 off to give yourself a bit more zoomed in. But that's a little bit too zoomed for me. I'd like to create a little bit of white space, above and below. So I'll show you another reference line trick to get that one to happen. So let's go into our analytics pane. I'm going to drag over a distribution band this time. So I'm going to drag that onto table, into sales. And distribution band defaults to 60% of the average and 80% of the average. Sometimes you can actually, if you've got a line that's not too variable, you can actually go in here and hack this to say, I want a line at about 50% and I want a line at 120%. And it'll actually put the lines exactly where you want, create that white space. But with the data like we've got at the moment, we really need to create two lines. So I'm going to create a line at 50% of the minimum. I'm going to turn off my label, turn off my fill. And you can see I've got a little line now there. Even though it's a distribution band, it's actually a line. But I haven't had to create any calculations for that. So I'm going to do the same thing again with a distribution band on my table. This time I'm going to do 120% of the maximum. Again, let's get rid of these labels. And voila, we now have a little line up there, a little line down there, and we've got a bit of white space. So back to my man, Sharad.
All right, so Sharad's back again, guys, and again, thanks to Craig for inviting me on his YouTube channel. And I believe the saying is teach an old dog rather than old flock. So, but that's a good one. That was a good tip right there. So, all right, so for my next tip, I have a map in which you can click on a state and it zooms onto that state, and if you click back it goes back, and of course it does the filter of the rest of the data from that click as well. And this is a very little handy trick, and I think I got it from Andy Kriebel's video. So most of them are from Andy Kriebel's video. That guy's a machine. So what I've done over here is in my action filter, so I'm starting my action filter from my dashboard, but my target sheet is actually my worksheet rather than the dashboard. So if you do that, it gives an effect that you're actually rendering that worksheet over here rather than the dashboard, and that is why you can see that zoom in effect. So yeah, very handy tip for guys who work a lot on map and required to show sometimes explicitly what they are clicking on. So all right, so for my next tip, again, I'm going to clear my worksheet and I'm going to show you a no axis bar chart. So traditionally when we create a bar chart, we have our sales measure in, and then we have our categories in, and then a bar chart is found, right? But see how it utilizes one of the axes. But what if you can create a bar chart without any axes? So I'm going to drag my sum of sales to level of detail, And then I'm going to change my mark type to Gantt, and I'm going to control drag my sum of sales to size, and that will duplicate this sheet. And on sorting that, you have a Gantt bar that looks like a bar chart exactly, but both of your axes are free for whatever magic you guys do with these axes. So that's another tip for you guys. For my next tip, I'm gonna drag my subcategory to color shelf. I didn't press control. I'm gonna do that again to color shelf, and I'm going to show you how you can change colors or assign a palette to all but one of these data items. So for example, I'll leave my phones out, and I'm going to shift select my chair, and then shift select fastener, so everything else is selected. Now you can go into any of the color palettes. I'm going to go with gray, and then assign that a palette, apply OK, and you see how little gradient of color is formed for rest of the axis, while your phone is still intact with the blue color. So, and a time saving tip for you guys. All right, for my next tip, so this is one of my favorite tips actually. I'm going to show you what is going on right now. So if you slide your continuous date slider, you see an animation kind of an effect, and it looks really cool, and especially when the native feature is not that good. I'll show you how it works natively. So if you select your continuous slider, everything grays out, and when you drop your slider, your axis turns into it resets, and you lose the context of visual change in your data. So the trick that I have is it takes your order date into level of detail shelf, and if I can show you what's going on in the background. So I'm going to turn on the borders, and now you can see it's not just this one big bar. Actually, it's the order date is at level of detail. So these are small little bar charts, bars that are forming. So if I turn that border thing off again, it looks like a bar, right? And now if you move your slider, it gives you that animated effect, and see how your axes are still intact. So visually you can see how much you've lost or gained from your initial value, and as soon as you drop your filter, the axis resets to the new value. So that's another tip right there. And for my last tip of the day, I have grand totals. So who else here uses grand total a lot? I use them all the time, and I was actually very excited when I saw the grand total. There is a new option in the grand total menu. So if you click on grand total, you see average. It used to be sum before, and it used to be skewed like this. But now what you can do is you can actually again click on your grand total and change it to minimum or automatic or average. So I've chosen average, and you can actually format your grand total as well. Change it to maybe a grand average. I don't know. And go crazy. It's a new feature, right? And you can actually move your grand total right up to the top of your chart as well by this menu on the right click. Traditionally, it was only available in the ribbon at top, but now it's right there. So another small thing that Tableau did for us to make our lives a bit easier. And that's it for my tips. So again, thanks, Craig, for having me.
Hey, no worries. Good to have you on, dude.
All right.
Good stuff, Sharad. That's I really enjoyed that, especially that total one. I didn't know you could do a total that was an average. That's a good insight. So let me just wrap up now. So I'm going to go back to my workbook. So we've already run over time. I doubt we'll get to do this bit tonight's TUG, but this is an encore maybe if we get invited back. So I'm going to show you how to do a bit of style borrowing. So I'm a fan of the Economist magazine, and if you are serious about getting some really good data journalism examples, Economist magazines, it's awesome. They've got a lot of really good charts in there that explain a whole lot of good stuff, and you can see that they have a kind of style. They've got this light blue, and they've got this little red rectangle at the top of the chart. So I'm just going to use this as a little example on how to use Tableau to borrow some style, shall we say. So let's create a new dashboard. We're going to pop that chart onto it, and we'll maybe make it a bit more friendly to my screen res. So I'm going to go with something that's maybe like that. We're going to get rid of our legend here. All right, so let's push this over to the side and let's start with our formatting. So we're going to format, and we go into shading, we go into worksheet, we go into more colors. See this pick screen color? A lot of people didn't know you could do a screen grabber. So if I go over here onto the blue background in the Economist chart, I can borrow that color. So let's see what else we can do. So you might have noticed that the Economists love their dotted white grid lines. So I'm going to go into my grid lines in the rows, and I'm going to make them a bit thicker and maybe put some dots on them. And while I'm here, I'm going to get rid of this line here. So that line may be a vertical line or it may be an axis line. Let's see. So that's a column by the look of it, and we'll get rid of our row dividers as well. But if that line doesn't go away, it's probably because you've got an axis ruler on. So see that axis ruler? You might need to turn that one off as well. So we've got a little bit of tidy up here to do. Did you know you can open that up and get rid of the axis labels there, make it a little cleaner? And now this sheet 2 title. So I'm going to get rid of that title because I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to put this into some containers. So I'm going to drag a vertical container onto my dashboard. I'm going to pop that sheet inside. I'm going to grab a horizontal container. I'm going to slide that up the top. Now I'm going to grab some text. Now I'm going to put in data journalism type title. Superstore sales are on the increase. And now I want to make that blue as well. So I can actually right-mouse click and format that text object. But that'll leave a little white line underneath it, which isn't real nice. So I'm going to show you another tip. If you double-click on that container and then double-click on that container, you've got the container selected. So what you can do is you can actually format containers. And then I'm going to go with my old blue shading. So to finish this off now, I'm going to maybe make this a little bit bigger. Let's make it 16 and bold and black. And the Tableau font appeals to a lot of folks out there, but you know what? I'm going to format my whole workbook. Instead of using Tableau Book, I'm going to use a font called Railway, which is I think I got from a Workout Wednesday exercise off good old Andy Kriebel. I like that font too. It's a shame I can't put it up onto Tableau server. So just to finish it finally, see you've got a little white border around the edge there. So if I format my dashboard, I can actually make my default shading a light shade of grey, and that goes away as well. So there you go. I've now borrowed the style of The Economist, except I'm missing one thing. What's that little red rectangle? That's why I put that inside a horizontal container. I'm going to now grab myself another little piece of text. Now if I hold down Shift, I could float it there, but it's not going to work for me. So I'm just going to put it to the side of my horizontal container, maybe make it a space, and I'm going to now go and borrow that color again. So I'm going to format my text object. I'm going to go into shading. I've already got it in my palette there, but let's pick it off the screen if we can get very close enough. That's good enough. Now I'm going to edit that width, let's say make it 10 pixels, and voila, we're all done. We now have our own Economist article. So hope you enjoyed that. Thanks to all of those people who contributed their tips on the blogs, especially to Jeff Shaffer and Andy Kriebel at the TCC 16 and 17, all of the Zen Master tips as well, and all of those great blogs, including the good folks at the Data School. So signing off, hope you enjoyed those tips. It's bye from me and
bye from Sharad.
till next time. See you guys.